Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Kate Hamilton Health Podcast. In today's episode, we chat all things periods, so be ready. I sit down with Kathryn Stewart, who is known online as Her Health dietitian. Kathryn is a registered dietitian and sports nutritionist specializing in hypothalamic amenorrhea, HA as it's also known as, irregular or missing periods, fertility optimization and long-term female health. Her work centres on helping women nourish their bodies adequately, rebuild trust with food, restore their menstrual cycles, and move away from restriction, fear, and confusion around nutrition. Kathryn's professional focus is deeply informed by lived experience. Despite formal training in dietetics, she personally struggled with hypothalamic amenorrhea and found a striking lack of education, recognition, and support for hormonal disruption within the traditional training and healthcare. That experience led her to dive deeply into the research, evidence, and clinical nuance of menstrual dysfunction, energy availability, and fertility nutrition. Today, Kathryn supports women across the spectrum from missing or irregular periods to cycle restoration, fertility preparation, and prenatal nutrition using a compassionate, non-restrictive, and sustainable approach. We base most of our conversation around HA, hypothalamic amenorrhea, which is a really fancy name for loss of your menstrual cycle or your period. This is a really, really informative conversation, and even if it is not something that you have experienced, it is something to really educate yourself on, because this is something that's becoming a hell of a lot more normal in today's society for a variety of different reasons, which we talk about. This is a really, really important conversation, and I'm really, really proud to be able to share this with you. So please do listen, please do enjoy, and I really hope that it does help. Kathryn, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I am so excited to chat. Before we get into it, we kind of go through exactly what it is that you do. Let's start off with your mission. What is your mission?
I was thinking about this last night, but I would say my mission is to help females with no period or irregular periods have a path to regaining their period and regulating their period as well, when maybe they're not getting the answers that they might need or the support that they might need as well in terms of that journey.
Yeah. What led you to this mission? So that's a very, very specific mission, and a very, very important one. And very relevant, which is what we're going to obviously talk about through this podcast. But is there a story behind this, why this is so important to you?
Absolutely. Yeah, I always say I'm a really selfish dietitian. If it happens to me, I'm going to get into it. So when I was younger, I lost my period, I would say, for at least 1.5 years, but I was on the pill before, so I'm pretty sure there wasn't much happening in the background with my natural hormones at that time. And whenever I lost it, I suppose I went through the ignore stage. This is okay, it's not an issue, to then going to the GP to discuss it. And I always remember when I went, I can remember these, it was like, my BMI is normal, I'm a dietitian and I don't want to conceive. And so like it wasn't really it didn't seem like a priority to them or an issue to them. So, when a health professional isn't too concerned, then am I going to be too concerned, whilst also maybe having that underlying knowing that something wasn't right and that it needed addressed as well. So I heard the word amenorrhea in that appointment, and I remember going home and Googling after that. As a dietitian in the 4 years of studying I did and then doing sports nutrition after, I'd never ever heard of hypothalamic amenorrhea, which is losing your period due to stress, over-exercise, weight loss. So I Googled the life out of that, kind of came to thinking, okay, maybe amenorrhea means hypothalamic amenorrhea, and a lot of the things were ringing true for me, but there was no support in that area in terms of period regain. And I always say resentfully regained my period at that time, because I wasn't sure. It was like the blind leading the blind. I didn't know whether I was doing the right thing, if this was maybe making the issues worse, was it actually PCOS or something different. And I suppose I just wanted to become the support that I didn't have in that time. And I went through that process, and maybe I didn't start working with people with no periods until maybe 2 or 3 years after, when I saw someone with disordered eating and no period and thought, wait a minute, maybe I can actually help and kind of know a way out of this for that client, and a way that I could support them too. So I think maybe having the personal experience and knowing how people feel before, during and after their period loss journey is super helpful. And I just love talking about periods.
Me too. But with your period loss, now looking back, do you know what caused it? Like what external factor? Is it stress? Was it sport? Was it under-eating? Or was it a combination of everything?
I think often people want to blame stress because it means maybe they don't need to address the food and the exercise. And I would say when I lost my period, I didn't feel stress at all. Now I'm like a little stress ball. So maybe I'd like to go back to that part. But I probably didn't feel much either as well because I knew I was under eating and restricting too much in that time. So I definitely know it was my obsession around calories and tracking calories and being quite rigid with food. To unsuspecting I would always go out for dinner. I would like eat out. I would have my mum's nice buns that she was making, but it was what happened before and after that maybe was the issue in terms of compensating or adding in extra exercise for that. I was also quite rigid in terms of having to do certain amounts of exercise. But again, to the unsuspecting eye, I maybe went to the gym 4 or 5 times a week and I walked to and from work at that time. So it didn't look excessive, and to me I thought, well, I'm not an athlete, so this isn't excessive exercise. I still have breakfast, lunch and dinner. I bring snacks with me to work. I have chocolate, like a little bit of chocolate every day. So I know that I was probably kidding myself in terms of there not being any issues when maybe the issues were building until I couldn't ignore them, and maybe the period loss was the couldn't ignore sign that I needed.
And what did your training look like? If you were training 4 or 5 times a week, what kind of exercise were you doing?
I can remember so vividly. I worked in Nottingham at the time, and I suppose it was my first job. I was like, yes, I'm earning my own money. I joined Virgin Active Gym there, which is probably the fanciest gym I've ever been in. And I always remember going through the turnstiles there and being like, I cannot wait to leave this place. And I used to always think, I was like, how do people enjoy the gym or exercise? Because I was like, this pains me to do. But I would always do it. And I don't know what I was doing in my training. I don't think I followed a program, but I knew that I would be tracking the calories on like a treadmill or a cross trainer or a bike. So I know it was maybe more cardio based, because if I was doing weights I couldn't see how many calories I was burning, so I thought that was a bit of a waste of time.
So there was that connection with exercise and burning calories that you might have done a little bit of resistance training, but really you were there for the cardio machines.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. If I couldn't see how much I was burning, then I thought it was a bit of a waste. So like yoga and those sorts of things, I thought, not a chance. Would I be wasting my time doing that? So, and then I also walked to and from work. I could have easily got a bus, but I thought I'll get up earlier and walk to work. And I do enjoy walking, but I'm working as well. I do enjoy walking, but maybe walking the same journey every day, 5 days a week. And I worked in a hospital at that time, so it was a really big hospital. I remember not trying to get more steps, but just tracking how many steps I did, and it was like 8,000 by just being in hospital, not even getting
without the
hospital.
walk to and from.
Without the walk to and from, without then going to the gym after or before as well. So I think I was trying to do it all whilst also tightening the reins on food and activity.
Yeah, like your body was probably burning quite a significant amount of calories because you were on the go from morning to night. And then what kind of calorie range were you in? And I know that's all very relative depending on the person and the size, but you know, as a young person who would have been burning quite a lot of calories.
I have no clue what it would be, and I'd maybe be a bit hesitant to say an exact amount in case someone who is listening to this and they might think, "Ooh." But I remember the first year of uni, and like one of my friends saying, "Oh, like, have you ever heard of MyFitnessPal?" And I was like, "No, what is this?" So then I downloaded it, and obviously it gives you a set amount of calorie goals.
And we all know
very
what set
distorted,
amount.
like a 1,200 or 1,400. So I definitely probably was in around that, maybe given a bit of leeway for activity, and it definitely did fluctuate at the weekends versus weekdays, but the
reason why I was asking that is because and I would get a lot of messages on social media about, you know, what calories should I start on MyFitnessPal, you know, because you know when you set up MyFitnessPal and it will be like, you know, how active are you and how much weight do you want to lose per week? I think that's the most harmful question, because who's going to, you know, half a pound, pound and a half, or 2 pounds? Everyone's going to pick 2 pounds. Yes, of course, please, like, let's get it done. And then straight away it's going to give you like 1,200 calories on average. And that was kind of my question around it, because I really like there's obviously calorie requirements are very different person to person, of course, body size, age, so many different factors, but for most women that number that MyFitnessPal is giving you is going to be highly under-fueling.
Exactly. And similar to maybe a 4-year-old. And I'm not against calorie tracking. I think it's a useful tool for a short period of time. But when I was thinking about like the timeline, I in my head thought, oh, maybe I did that for 2 years. But I started uni in 2011 and I got my period back in 2017.
That's a long
so like
time.
that's a long time, and I'm sure there was fluctuations between that, but that's a long time to be cracking the whip when it comes to food and exercise. So like if someone's calorie tracking, it shouldn't be for years and years on end. It's an educational tool, but I, even while I was studying to be a dietitian at that time, I was relying on a lot of external trackers to determine how much I should eat and maybe ignoring the internal signals.
Exactly, and I think that's a really good point. And you know, I do talk a lot about tracking calories with clients, and some clients will track with calories, some people won't. It's really important your mindset behind it, I think. And if someone listening is tracking calories, just make sure you're doing it to be like, am I getting enough fiber? Am I getting enough protein?
Exactly.
Using it am I actually fueling myself well, rather than, oh God, I have to restrict this, that and the other.
And how they're feeling as well, because, you know, probably if I was tracking other things then, like I definitely had more sluggish digestion and wasn't going as regularly. I definitely was more preoccupied with food. I definitely would be a little bit stressed about the idea of going out for food and how maybe I would manage that too as well. But for a lot of the time when I was doing that, I was on the contraceptive pill. So I probably just thought everything's taken away hunky-dory in the background. Little did I know.
And we get away with a lot in our 20s that, you know, that, and it's kind of in our 30s and 40s we really need to start healing what's happened. But in relation to hypothalamic amenorrhea, have I said that right?
I don't even know if I say it right. So
hypothalamic amenorrhea. What is it exactly? So I know we've danced around it here just in this kind of introduction, but what exactly is it? And like how would you define it, I suppose, first of all?
So I suppose maybe a more scientific answer would be it's a disruption to the hypothalamic pituitary ovarian axis. And I would say the hypothalamus is one domino, the pituitary is another domino, the ovaries are another domino, and it's like the dominoes aren't connected and knocking onto each other. So that then suppresses the first hormone that's suppressed by the hypothalamus in response to stress, activity, over-exercise, under-eating. The hypothalamus then interprets that stress. It's kind of like the project manager of everything. So, you know, the team's feeding back at stress. It thinks, how are we going to cut down on this stress? So it suppresses a hormone called gonadotrophin-releasing hormone, which then knocks on to suppress luteinizing hormone and follicle-stimulating hormone, which are involved in ovulation. And then that knocks on to suppress progesterone and estrogen. So it's basically an energy-saving condition to allow the body to prioritise energy for the absolute essentials, like pumping blood around the body, pumping oxygen around the body as well. Because it's nice to have regular digestion, it's nice to have a regular period, but when it comes down to it, ultimately the body's goal is to keep you alive and to keep things ticking in that way. So it's an energy-saving mechanism, but it is a condition and it's functional in terms of it's in response to the stress that your body interprets.
And that stress may not be being stressed, which we'll dive into now. But I think what's really important here as well is to note that, like, people might be like, obviously, Kate, if we're talking about periods, but it is a hormonal issue, because I think when we think about hormones, and I'm glad you mentioned different hormones there in different glands, we tend to think of, you know, estrogen, progesterone and cortisol, and that's all. You know, it's, I think some of us might even think, geez, do we have more hormones than that? You know, but that there's other things going on that, you know, are connecting the brain to the ovaries to the, you know, like there's a lot going on there that is affected. Yeah,
that's ticking along, I suppose, in the background that we don't necessarily know. Like, I probably had only ever heard of estrogen, and cortisol's maybe had a bit of airtime in the past few years, but I don't know if I'd have heard of that in the past either as well, or any of those other hormones. And maybe that's something that came after my own experience. I didn't ever know anything about the hypothalamus or pituitary or those hormones being suppressed when I was going through getting my period back, but then through going back and looking at more research and evidence and reading up on it, then I kind of learned that in hindsight and was able to piece together my experiences with the science and how that maybe tied in and fitted the puzzle pieces together.
Yeah, I think what's really important that you have said here as well is that, you know, the likes of digestion or a period are not essential. You know what I mean? So if your digestion is off, or we're not even going to talk about digestion, we put that aside, but if your periods are irregular or you stop getting a period, it is a sign that your body has gone into survival mode
Yeah.
for whatever reason. That, and
Yeah.
I remember at the horology event, I don't know if it was you or one of the other wonderful ladies that were talking, that said your period is like your monthly report, your monthly health report.
Yeah.
Once you get your period, it's regular enough, you know, you can be like, yes, great, good health this month. Well, you know.
And sometimes it's counted as like the 5th vital sign for females, but also in periods of like war times, famine, like the birth rate fell. Women weren't getting their periods as well, but like it wasn't something that was recognised. It probably was accepted in that time. Okay, that makes sense. But that was like a famine. Maybe not, you know, and external factors influencing the ability to get enough food.
Well, that's it, because if you're in a famine, you're not eating. But like, isn't that where it comes from? Like, even if we go back to like caveman times, you know, that when the men went out to get the food, and if they didn't bring back enough food, women would stop getting periods because they wouldn't have had enough food. So that would be your body's sign. I don't know where I heard this. That would be your body's sign that we can't reproduce. It's not safe. There's not enough food to feed someone else.
Yeah, because ultimately your body's thinking, okay, if we're having a period, do we have enough energy should conception happen?
Yeah.
And absolutely, there was no spare change when it came to energy when I had hypothalamic amenorrhea. Not that that was never my goal around that time, but I also remember listening to a podcast, not health related, where they were talking about being in fight or flight and sex drive and things like that, and they were, this might be a little bit crude, but they were like, you know, no man is going to war and being on the war line with feeling like their libido has increased in that moment. So
That's
it can
true,
also impact males, and I suppose maybe that's more relative energy deficiency in sport or testosterone deficiencies that it can impact as well. And I suppose maybe I've boxed myself in calling myself her health dietitian, especially now I'm working a little bit more in fertility as well, and I suppose that's involves two sides. But yeah, it definitely is maybe more fight or flight and just the stress in the body, but it doesn't need to be I feel stressed. It can come from other sources.
I think there seems to be, I don't know whether it's just because I'm in the female health space, but there seems to be a huge increase in the normalization of not having a period. And that's not by no means pointing the finger at anyone and saying, oh, you think it's normal and, you know, there's something wrong with you. Not at all. But I just think the more women who seem to have lost their period, the more then it just seems socially acceptable or normal, and maybe they've gone to a doctor. And actually, I know people who've lost their period who've gone to a doctor, and the doctor's like, well, there's nothing wrong, and you know, everything seems to be fine. And I know this is a conversation we were having beforehand as well, that you know, if the medical professional, the doctor, tells you everything is okay, then like, what do you even do there? You know, it's becoming more normalized. And I think, like, correct me if I'm wrong, that it would have been much more kind of an issue with athletes and maybe people who have seriously disordered eating or eating disorders. Whereas now I think maybe it's the rise in health and fitness, and people are running marathons and they're training for high rocks, and they're, you know, they're doing bodybuilding shows or photo shoots, you know, is another big thing at the minute. There's a huge rise in it, isn't there?
Yeah, definitely. And also, I think, like, you know, maybe it's accepted that you would lose your period if you had an eating disorder. Maybe it was previously accepted a little bit more that you would lose your period if you were an athlete. But I know I see plenty of clients who, you know, compete to a very high level, but I also see plenty of clients who train regularly and they are doing way more than maybe those athletes that are competing for very high level sports or teams as well. So, and also, you know, typically people who lose their period look, quote unquote, very healthy on paper. They're active, they're eating well, again, quote unquote, as well. But it's very hard as someone, and maybe most of the females I work with, they're maybe in like their 20s or early 30s. Like, it's very hard if you're not from a healthcare background as well to question a healthcare professional. Like, I would never have done that whenever I went to see the GP. I just kind of brought the information and thought, let's see how this goes. You know, I would have never went back and been like, here, actually, this is this, or no, I don't think this is right. So it is difficult to advocate for yourself, but also there can be, you know, GPs have to know so much about everything. So I know sometimes I say like, oh, you know, someone's went to the doctor and they've been told this is normal, and that's not the case. Like, I'm sure it's so difficult for them to have to try and pinpoint if they don't have as much experience or knowledge in that area as well. And maybe I feel the opposite, where maybe it's been spoke about more and not being accepted as much. But that's probably the type of people who are contacting me and saying, you know, I know something's not right. But I would say the most of the females I work with went through a period of ignoring and accepting that this is okay for a while, until like that kind of inner voice, maybe gut feeling, kind of builds and builds till they think, okay, maybe this is something I need to address.
Yeah. how do you go about getting a diagnosis of HA? HA being is how we shorten it, isn't
Oh,
it?
yeah,
Like,
definitely.
HA, because like obviously there can be other things going on.
Yeah.
And particularly like I work with a lot of women who are over the age of 40. So, you know, as we get mid to late 40s, we're talking perimenopause as well. But, you know, there can also be a lot of women in their 40s who are training for marathons or high rocks that, you know, and it can be like, oh, it's just my age.
Yeah.
Or, you know, that these, I would imagine if you kind of are under fueling and overtraining and you are dealing with perimenopause, that's going to make it a shitload harder, a hell of a lot worse. I would imagine.
Because I always say menopause is a natural process where gradually your ovaries stop and slow down working and estrogen production slows and reduces. Whereas hypothalamic amenorrhea is a condition where then estrogen production slows or stops or is suppressed. So there can be a crossover in terms of symptoms, which can also be pretty tricky as well. And I suppose the more I learn about menopause, the more I'm maybe more hyper aware of maybe those, you know, age groups where people might be like late 30s, early 40s of perimenopausal symptoms coming in. And as much as I have the personal experience and a lot of client experience with different scenarios of people losing their period, I always encourage people, the first stop is to go to see your GP. Get your bloods done. And like describe your diet and lifestyle as well, because that's a really important part in terms of
not
the
always
diagnosis.
asked, is it?
Yes, that's why I said describe. Even if you're not asked, tell them.
Come with the information, bring the list, bring the plan.
I can't remember. So there was a study in Australia, I think, done, and it was 80. I always get this confused. 86% of people diagnosed with PCOS or diagnosed with HA would have been diagnosed with PCOS had they not been asked diet and lifestyle questions. So there is a little bit of a crossover in the diagnosis. So obviously, you know, it seems silly. You go with no period, they'll rule out pregnancy. You know, and some people that might be the very thing that they're wanting their period back for as well. They will check their bloods in terms of iron and thyroid. You might be referred for a pelvic ultrasound as well. And that might be through a gynecologist that will do that as well. And I suppose they're looking for anatomical reasons or physical reasons why you're not getting a period. Then you might be referred to an endocrinologist, or you might be referred back to your GP as well to discuss further. I suppose if someone maybe isn't getting a clear answer, then it can be very difficult for them to think, okay, let's, you know, I've read this is what it takes to get my period back, but I don't know why it's missing in the first place. I don't know, is it hypothalamic amenorrhea? Could it be PCOS? So it's very hard to lean into that recovery process without a diagnosis. So I'd always try and push for a diagnosis. And whilst I see a lot of people and I think, oh, like it definitely sounds as if they have HA, I would always encourage them to get a diagnosis first, even just for throughout the process that we work on. Sometimes there can be a bit of questioning and think, what if this isn't the case and I'm making things even worse by what we're doing?
Yeah, because as a dietitian, you're not giving a diagnosis. They need to have the diagnosis to come to you, and then you're there for the solution and the recovery plan.
Yeah, and sometimes that might mean, you know, switching to a different GP or pushing for like an endocrinology referral or something like that.
Can someone come to you if they're like, I've missed my period, or I'm missing my period, I've been to the doctor, I keep getting cast aside? Like, can people come to you for you to help them advocate for themselves to get the diagnosis to start?
I don't mind writing a little letter saying, pretty please, thank you, I'd be so grateful if you could check this. But also, I suppose, ultimately, I'm looking at fueling, activity, nutrition. So even if someone's having a regular period, you know, I would still look at those things, and whether they have a diagnosis or not, I kind of would be able to look and see, okay, let's look at all other symptoms, digestion, which we'd mentioned before, maybe sleep. It's quite often people will wake early, they'll not be able to get back to sleep, they'll struggle getting to sleep, or they'll sleep in issues, maybe night sweat sometimes as well. Looking at energy levels and also mood, and also feeling cold, like cold hands and feet all the time. That's definitely something that I struggled with, but I just always said, oh, cold wifey, I'm always cold, when that's not the case as well. So I suppose a diagnosis is good to have, but we can still be working on things to hopefully try and correct food-wise, nutrition-wise and lifestyle-wise that might be feeding into those hormonal issues and no period as well.
So if we leave, because we'll go into the solution and kind of what you do now in a minute, but before we do, if someone is listening and they kind of have just kind of been leaving things be and be like, oh, look, this is just the way I am, this is normal for me, what are the health consequences to long-term lack of period, like with not dealing with finding out what's going on underneath? What are the potential health consequences?
Yeah, I suppose most people think of fertility as the first line, because if you're not having a regular period, chances are you're not ovulating, chances are it's going to take a longer time to pregnancy, or it's going to be quite difficult to become pregnant. So that is a consequence of hypothalamic amenorrhea. To my knowledge, there's no long-term consequences once you regain your period on fertility, which is reassuring. But I would say that's the driving factor for me seeking help, even though I was in my 20s. was single, was definitely not wanting
But
to
it
try for a
probably
baby,
is.
but it was a
Yeah.
background like,
But
what if-
like most young women
Yeah.
are going to think that, you know, if you want to have a family someday and if you haven't got a period, you're like, shit, I
Yeah.
better sort this shit now. Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
suppose it's something I'm like, whoa, okay, like I know this is my behaviours that are feeding into this.
Yeah.
So if this is something I could correct, maybe I want to dip a toe in terms of what that might look like. But the key and most long-term health consequence, or most serious long-term health consequence of hypothalamic amenorrhea is bone loss or low bone mass. So females with hypothalamic amenorrhea tend to have up to 15% lower bone mass than those who have a regular period or equivalent, and you can lose up to 2 to 3% of your bone mass per year of no regular period. That's not to scare people. I've already calculated I probably lost about 5%, in terms of me having no period. But you also, a lot of people lose their period maybe in their early 20s. Maybe they haven't reached their peak bone mass at that stage, but also focusing on calcium, vitamin D, but also adequate nutrition. And sometimes people think, okay, well, I'll protect my bone mass by doing more weight bearing exercise. But the key factor in terms of optimizing bone mass will be restoring your period and helping in terms of increasing those estrogen levels. So bone mass is a key factor. Stress fractures are much more common. In athletes with amenorrhea, about a third will experience a stress fracture, whereas only 5% of those with a regular period might do as well. And then also heart health. So estrogen helps the blood vessels to stay flexible. So it can help in terms of regulating total cholesterol, LDL, which is the cholesterol we don't want too much of, and HDL, which we want more of. So it helps to regulate those levels. So quite often people with no period or low estrogen, hypothalamic amenorrhea, might go to the GP and they say they've got high cholesterol. Okay, we'll cut down on fats, make sure you're being active.
Suddenly
and that's
they're dieting and exercising more.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Again, something that I probably learned along the way. So they're kind of like the heart health, bone health, fertility are kind of the key things that people think of, but also digestion wise, poor sleep. It can impact your mood. And I suppose with mood, it can be a chicken and egg. Like, was it low mood fed into this stress, or actually has a lack of energy and poor energy availability fed into low mood and irritability? Yeah. So it's difficult to know what came first. And females with hypothalamic amenorrhea have higher scores in terms of depression scales, anxiety scales, and difficulty coping with day-to-day tasks. But we're, again, not sure if it's a cause or effect when it comes to that.
I think that bone density piece is absolutely huge, and I'm so relieved it's finally becoming talked about so much more, because it's not something that women think about. And for decades it's been all about getting smaller and smaller and skinnier, and that diet culture. And I was listening to a podcast recently where they were discussing how we now have this frailty epidemic of post-menopausal women that didn't strength train, that didn't know how to adequately fuel themselves, and that there's proven that there's an increase in dementia and things like that in women as well, because of that it's all tied in together.
Yeah, definitely. And it wouldn't concern me if someone said in my 20s, like, this will affect your bone mass. I'd be like, I don't care. I'll worry about that when the time comes. Whereas I always say to people, we work hard enough, we want to have a good retirement. We don't want to be bouncing in and out of the fracture ward. And females already have a way higher prevalence of fractures than males. But I suppose going through puberty, pregnancies, menopause, all those sorts of things, there are fluctuations in hormones. So it's what we can do and control and to try and optimise that as much as possible. And I did work in a fracture ward for a while, and definitely there was far more females in it than there was males, but the recovery statistics for that maybe weren't too good either as well. So we want to try and optimise things for future.
And women are living longer than men, but they're not necessarily living better.
Yeah.
Women are suffering longer, I think, is what the statistics are as well.
And when I retire, I want to be going on holidays with my friends.
God, me too. I have adventures to be having. And it's funny, I'll be 40 on my next birthday, and I'm just my mum is in her late 60s, so she's still quite young, but I'm noticing her getting older, and my aunties, and and it's but more so my mum, really, and I notice her, and I'm, she started doing things like she's going to aqua aerobics, and now she's got arthritis, and she's got, some joint issues and stuff as well, so she can't really lift weights, but she's going to her aqua aerobics, and she's doing a bit of yoga, and she's actively trying to do this now. But this information wasn't available to her generation.
Yeah,
really,
and also maybe with the food side of things, some people cut down. Maybe then they switch to plant-based milks, or maybe they don't. Maybe they make their porridge on water now, and they don't add milk in. They're cutting down the calcium sources. Or maybe they don't add in cheese, but most people are maybe having the yogurts and the Greek yogurts. But then the calcium intake might be going down as well. So I'd say a large part of that is just the education around it and how important calcium is. And I think we're going through each of the nutrients. Protein has been very popular. Fiber's getting a lot of airtime now. I'm sure calcium will be coming soon in terms of making sure that we focus on that too.
And it's so funny. Like, I actually remember as a child, my mum being really big on the calcium drink. I had to have a glass of milk with dinner because you have to get your calcium in. But we're living in an age where it's very trendy to be lactose intolerant. No, sorry, I know some people are lactose intolerant, but there's a lot of people that just cut out dairy because they're like, oh, I don't think dairy's good for me. And that can be the case. But how do we make sure we're getting enough calcium if we're taking away yogurt, cheese, milk out of our diet?
And you can absolutely support bone health by not taking dairy as well. Like the plant-based options are fortified as long as they're not organic. If they're organic, by law, they're not allowed to add calcium into it. But also when you add in calcium into an oat milk or almond milk or soy milk, it usually sediments towards the bottom. So you need to give it a good shake before you
Otherwise you're just getting it all at the end of the carton.
And maybe people don't like the plant-based cheeses as much as, they might like the plant-based milk. So it's thinking, okay, well, are we prepared to have, 3 milky drinks a day or 3 plant-based milks a day?
Does that count if we have it in our coffees?
Yeah, lattes. Matchas are a very good way. Actually, I suppose you want to use the trends to your advantage. So, like, matcha is very trendy. If we can then get in a lot more calcium through the milk and that, then
because I've noticed, like, I'd have 3 coffees a day, which I do think I need to reduce to 2 because my stress levels. I do think I would probably be better on a little less. But anyway, I do have 3 coffees a day. But when I'd be tracking that sometimes, I'm like, I actually get a decent amount of protein in through my 3 coffees. So the calcium there counts as well. That's good. I just wondered, did the caffeine counteract the calcium?
Not to my knowledge, but I suppose
you'd want to be getting it in other ways as well.
Yeah, and I'd be thinking, okay, if we have a milky coffee, at least there's some nutrition with that, whereas sometimes caffeine can suppress our appetite a little bit and make us feel like, okay, we've got a boost in energy.
We don't want to be having coffees instead of our meals, but just if we're trying to get that extra boost, that, it does count.
Yeah, and I wish I liked coffee. I wish I could get that caffeine hit, but I don't. So I'm very aware that, like, when I'm talking about coffee and caffeine and cutting down, or maybe just being mindful of that, I don't enjoy it. I love tea instead. So, there's nothing. Coffee and caffeine won't prevent your period coming back unless you're using it as a meal or a snack replacement.
Yeah, and you're using it to get through the day and you're not listening to your body. Whereas if you can do it, it's funny, I didn't drink coffee for years. Like, all through school, college, like, I was never into coffee, and it's only I'd say it must only be about 3 years ago or something that I actually started. Yeah, I was like, I think I'm going to get into coffee. I stopped drinking a few years ago, so I don't drink at all anymore. But my thing is, I love going out during the day and go to a nice coffee shop.
Whenever I buy a tea, I think I've been rinsed here. Like, this is a tea bag and a drop of milk. So maybe I'll go for a hot chocolate. And it's funny, because coffee out is always nicer than at home, whereas tea out is never as nice as tea at home. That is so. That's so true.
Isn't it?
So that's why I always need to cash in the tray bakes or the buns, because I'm like, okay, I've just got something I could make it home so easily. But I do like coffee cake, so maybe that's a
and
gateway.
You have to have something nice with it as well. Anyway, that was a little off topic. Let's talk about what you do in clinics. So if someone comes to you and been like, I haven't had my period for 6-7 months or whatever, or even longer, into a couple of years, and you they get a diagnosis. Like, what is the solution? I'm sure it's probably very individualised, but what kind of things are important to start prioritising to really get your hormone health back on track?
I mean, usually I work with people over 16 weeks. It used to be 8, then it was 12, then it was 16, because I just feel like it maybe needs a longer period of support. And when anyone's working on maybe trying to regulate their periods if they've been irregular, or trying to restore them, like if you think a menstrual cycle is between 21 and 35 days, so really if I'm only working with someone for 8 weeks, how much change are we going to see? So usually I always go over like all of the history, if there's been any bloods, investigations, when they think they lost a period, was there any contraceptives in between, did they come off the pill and then lose it, and then also looking through diet, lifestyle, stress and activity. And usually in the first week we usually just pick out 2 to 3 things that are maybe obvious to me, that are like the low-hanging fruit in terms of what someone could change, because someone might be walking the dog a couple of times a week and the next person could have an active job. So I always say, is your work a workout? If you work in a hospital, you're probably on your feet all day. If you're a personal trainer or physio, you're on your feet all day as well. If you're gardening, if you work outside, a manual job, where that is already a high baseline of activity, and then we're doing more on top of that as well. But also looking at the food, are we eating consistently and regularly? Is it maybe more focused on tipping the side of higher protein, higher fibre, versus maybe higher energy foods as well. And then I kind of take them through a process. So maybe one week we might look at, okay, let's just take the meals and maybe make it a little bit more digestible, because I suppose I'm like a fixer and I want to give people solutions, and all the solutions that they can start on, but it can be quite overwhelming to unpick habits of maybe a lifetime or a very long period of time. So maybe one week we look at meals and let's recalibrate and balance these, make sure that we're getting adequate carbohydrates and fats, which is not as cool as getting more protein or fibre at the moment as well. So looking at that, making sure it's adequate portions of that as well. My bugbear is that the breakfast portions are always smaller than lunch and dinner. So like 2 scoops of oats is the same as 1 slice of bread in your sandwich at lunch. And there's no reason why breakfast should be smaller than lunch. If anything, you know, we should be making sure that we're having adequate breakfast, especially if someone's working on period regain. Then looking at snacks, are they there? And also, what are they made up of? Is it more like yogurt fruit? Or are there some, you know, nuts in there? Is there something with carbohydrates in it? It could be toast, cereals, granola bars, or some baked options, dried fruit, bananas. And then also looking at your exercise. One, with exercise, I always think, one, can we fuel what you're already doing a little bit better? Because I think people are terrified to maybe reach out for help when thinking, okay, I'm going to need to give up all this activity and I really enjoy it. Or maybe they see their friends at the gym, or there's like a social aspect to it. Or it could be...
So you're not trying to take things away that people enjoy.
Yeah, and I suppose like in times gone by, and maybe I've been like, well, okay, this person is not going to get their period back if they're doing like CrossFit 4 mornings a week. And I've been proven to be wrong. So, you know, with that, like we fuel, that person was like, I am not going to give this up. So I was like, okay, like let's work together to make sure it's really well fueled. And that took a little bit of time in terms of being able to just tolerate food before morning activity as well. So we'd look at fuel and the existing activity first, looking at the timings. Can we maybe push it to later in the day, or make sure that definitely we've had at least a meal or a snack before? And then maybe looking at the types. So is there a lot of high intensity activity, high rocks, CrossFit, running, those sorts of things? Could some of them be substituted for something that's a little bit lower intensity? Because often people think, okay, well, I need to quit this exercise for a while, not forever. And then they sit at home resentful of the fact that they can't do it. So does that mean you get an extra hour in bed? Or does that mean that you can actually do your food shop during the week and you don't need to do it at the weekend? Or can you catch up in that series or have a little bit more time for yourself? But a lot of people who maybe lose their period aren't used to having time for themselves. I think a lot of people in general, maybe now, it's time for ourselves is what's left over at the end of the day, rather than scheduling in what we can do. So I always think of those 3 pillars and think how we could tweak things for that individual person. So I suppose like the balance in meals and making sure we're kind of prioritizing carbohydrates and fats will not be any different for one person versus the next person, but the changes and the scale of changes might be different depending on someone's start point. And similar with activity. Yeah,
and depending, I suppose, as well, on how much they need to fuel on the activity and how much they're willing to bend. Let's look at the nutrition side of things first then. So you would recommend, obviously, breakfast, super important, regular meals throughout the day. I'd imagine you are not a big fan of fasting.
Absolutely not. No,
not and good also, for female health, really,
and sometimes people will just delay breakfast a wee bit longer. Like it could only be 2 hours after they're getting up that then they have breakfast. But actually pushing that a little bit earlier, because you know, it can be part schedule, mornings can be really busy for a lot of people, but it can also maybe be, well, if I delay this and push this out, then if I feel hungry later, I've still got all my snacks and meals to be going through. And then you're kind of maybe disturbing the natural hunger signals, because maybe you're ignoring a little bit of hunger in the morning time, and then there's more food squished into a shorter space of time.
This is a huge issue, I think, and I think a lot of women do this, where it's like, I'll say just in case, you know, because I'm always hungry in the evenings. But what a lot of people don't realise is they're always hungry in the evenings because of the blood sugar level drops and from leaving big gaps. Their body is trying to catch up. If you've tried to lose weight and didn't get results, here's why. The plans you followed were built for perfect people with perfect lives, not for women with jobs, stress, cravings, kids, and days that don't go to plan. Also, there's no such thing as perfect. That's why Nourish Her, my online coaching program, works. We build a plan around your lifestyle so that you lose weight without restriction. Build strength with workouts designed for your level, and finally stop the cycle of restarting. If you want predictable progress instead of waiting for motivation, if you want a routine that survives real life, if you want results that last, go to the link in the show notes and join the women who chose the smart approach instead of the hard one. So, like, I love to hear you say this, and I think, you know, when people ask me about fasting, I really like fasting, you know, I really like to go 12, 14 hours without eating. and I've read it's good for this, that and the other. I'm like, okay, stop eating after dinner and don't eat till breakfast.
Yeah,
but no one wants to do that. Everyone wants to skip breakfast. Everyone wants to have their evening snacks and not eat till lunch. And
that's
like,
so
no.
true.
Yeah, it's like you can fast while you're asleep,
And people
the
are
evening and the
definitely more comfortable with erring on the side of hunger than erring on the side of fullness. So a lot of times people will be like, well, I didn't have that snack because in case lunch was a wee bit earlier and then I'd feel too full. But often when actually they do that, they realise that was a comfortable level of fullness, or they haven't been used to feeling full and actually feeling full. Like if food takes up an area outside your body, it's going to take up space inside your body. And I suppose it's recognising it's normal to feel full after a meal. Whereas a lot of the females I work with have been used to feeling that kind of low level of hunger, which can be ignored.
So it's kind of scary then to feel full.
And maybe fullness feels like too full or stuffed. And it can take a little bit of time for your gut and stomach to adjust. So like I always feel really mean when people come to me, they start work and they feel like, okay, I've rested more and now I feel more tired. I'm eating more and now I feel more bloated, and I'm eating more and now I feel more hungry. And I'm like, great, this means that we're making changes. But all of those things can be absolutely terrifying, because if someone's starting to eat a little bit more, challenge their relationship with food, or if there is any disordered eating behaviours in the background, then the idea of eating more and it not paying off and them feeling full can be very scary. But that's like the speed bump. We'll get over the speed bump and things will settle. But if we kind of go halfway up the speed bump and then we can run back to the restriction, or actually think, no, we'll not eat regularly, then you're going to have to go through that phase again.
It's funny that you say that, because it's the exact same obstacle to fat loss. So like I work with women who are, who are trying to lose body fat and in a sustainable way. And the biggest complaint I get when people start working with me is my calories are too high, or if they're not tracking calories, I'm eating too much, I'm just so full all the time and they can't get over it. Or even they get really fixated on the scales, and they're like, the scale's not moving, but then like they're losing centimeters and inches, and they're you can see it in their photos, their jeans are getting looser, and the scale, but the scales isn't moving. And I'm like, but you're eating more protein, you're eating more fiber, you're hydrating better, you're using your muscles, trust the process. But I think a lot of women in relation to dieting, and people who want to get to a healthy, might be overweight and want to get to a healthy weight, they give up. Because when they do it the right way, they're feeling full. And hunger is actually the enemy to fat loss. Yeah. Because you need to feel full, and you need to structure. It is the same principles,
in terms of just regulating and reconnecting with those signals as well too, and being able to listen and tune into what your body needs as well. But I always describe that phase as like you're walking through mud or walking through glue. Like it doesn't feel intuitive at all, and you're probably quite resentful of doing it as well. But it's the cliche,
isn't it, of trusting the process. And it's just interesting that it's a similar resistance either end of the scale, really. And definitely. That in the middle, when you push through that resistance and you do trust the process, then you enter into the area of health and optimizing. Optimizing.
And there's a lot of freedom in that, but there's also, for some people, it can feel like there's freedom in restriction and freedom in a lot of control, and it can feel like, how would I get from there to feeling that fullness, feeling my hunger as well? It can feel really way off. But also a lot of times when I work with females, they might say, I eat out at the weekend, I'm happy to go out, I'll have pastry on Saturday, we'll eat on Saturday night, but then they tighten the reins during the week. And I suppose then their experience of trying to allow themselves to feel the hunger is the weekend, and then pulling back after as well. So it's kind of like, I always describe it as the finger on the edge of the cliff. You're allowing yourself a little bit of leeway, but you're still pulling back the reins on the control. And that can be terrifying if you actually can't think of a time when we were able to trust our hunger, versus maybe letting external factors control that as well. So like I always try and educate people on hunger and fullness, and feeling that fullness and honouring your hunger down the line. But in the initial phases of period regain, it's unlikely someone will regain their period if they were waiting to feel hungry before eating, because usually their hunger is a little bit more suppressed. So sometimes they need to eat to feel hungry. Which is kind of the opposite way.
Interesting. I want to talk a little bit on the mindset side and the mental health side of that, but I want to circle back to that, because while we're still talking about nutrition, I want to talk just a little bit about carbs and fats, because this is, a common misconception, which is getting better with the right people putting out the right information on social media, let's say. We need fats, we need carbs. It isn't, like you said, just protein and vegetables. I know vegetables are carbohydrates to a certain degree. They are carbohydrates, but we need other carbohydrates as well as our vegetables.
Yeah.
to
And
really
with
fuel
my clients, I
ourselves.
always say, unless it's sweet potato, we're not counting it as a carbohydrate at the moment.
Yeah,
Because
I like
then
to keep
we
it
can
as a
lean
separate
on.
food group. Really, I'm like, protein, carbs, fats,
Yeah.
vegetables.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. I always say like protein, fats, color, and carbs in terms of
colour,
that. But
yeah.
with the fat, like fat is the flavor. So like when people have a big, massive meal, they can feel physically full, but maybe there's loads of protein and loads of fiber in that. But then they always need something sweet after, or they're always craving some, and that's more of the satisfaction factor. So if we're getting enough of the fats in, then I always describe it as like a meal at home versus a meal out. Like maybe after a meal out, you're like, I'm stuffed. Like I'm not even bothered by that dessert menu. Making the same equivalent meal at home, you might be like, right, okay, like I need
I need my tea and chocolate
after,
now.
yeah.
And I
definitely
experienced that a lot, and it's only in recent years, because I like that I would have always been low fat yogurts and low fat everything kind of, and I would always have like my lunch or whatever, and then I would have to have the chocolate bar afterwards, and it was introducing, whether it's the nuts, the seeds, the avocado, even like I make this like chicken sandwich. Like if my clients are listening, they'll be laughing because I always talk about my chicken sandwich, because people are always like, what will I make for lunch? I was like, there's nothing wrong with a sandwich. I make this chicken sandwich, but basically it'd be like chicken salady bits or whatever, cheese, 2 slices of bread, throw it on the sandwich maker. But I started to add half an avocado mashed up in there. Gives a gorgeous texture. But I actually, even though I know, like in theory, that's going to make you feel fuller, I couldn't get over how much of a difference that made to my satisfaction after the sandwich.
yeah, exactly. And sometimes it could just be allowing yourself to explore those things and monitor and see, because one meal might be really satisfying to one person, might not be satisfying to the other person. Or like I love sweet breakfast, like if I go to a cafe and there's pancakes or French toast or something like that, like I'm absolutely going to go for that. But maybe after night out I want something salty. So if I stuck to this sweet breakfast after night out, I might feel more sick, or feel like, I still feel like that hasn't really ticked the box for me in terms of that area of hunger and fullness and appetite. So interesting, even realizing there's different types of hunger. There's like the practical hunger, which might be you never see some with young children leave the house without snacks. But then as adults, we forget that we need snacks as well, or we're comfortable going a little bit longer. But practical hunger could also be doing a shopping list or batch cooking, or just planning, okay, like this is going to be a really long meeting. I need to make sure I have a bigger breakfast before, or that I have some handy or discreet snacks.
It is about planning ahead, isn't it? Like it is just like, and we would say this with our clients as well, you need to be a day ahead of yourself, like at least. Just plan your meals for the next day before you go to bed. If you have a busy day, obviously if you have a quiet day, you can go with the flow. But like, and I would really structure my day around that. I'm a bit like a toddler. I don't come out without snacks or knowing that I'm going somewhere for lunch, because I just I hate feeling hungry. But I was minding my 6-month-old nephew the other day, and like my 3 kids are older now, so it's grand, but I forgot to have lunch, and then I had like a physio appointment, and I had forgot to have lunch, and I was driving home from the physio. I was like, oh my God, I'm starving, and I was like, oh my God, it's nearly 3 o'clock. I haven't eaten since 9. What? And I was like, that you forget how busy life can get, because I wasn't used to that routine, but it's just so important.
And there's appetite disruptors as well, where like your body doesn't know a busy schedule from a burning building. So if you are go, and a lot of the times with the females I work with, it isn't necessarily that they feel stressed, but I always tell them, write out your schedule and give it to a friend or a family member and be like, what do you think about this? And usually there isn't time to catch a breath, because it's just go the whole entire day. So if that's the case, then when you get home in the evening time, you're a little bit more relaxed, you have a little bit more time. Then sometimes there can be a surge in hunger, and it can feel a bit counterintuitive to be like, that hunger isn't to do with dinner or the evening snapshot, it's to do with earlier in the day, and making sure that we're kind of planning ahead in terms of that as well, because it doesn't feel natural. If I needed to take antibiotics, I wouldn't wake up in the morning time being like, well, I can't wait to have my antibiotics. I need to set alarms, reminders, post-its, all those sorts of things. And when you're doing new kind of structures, habits in terms of food, then it needs to be like that as well. So usually I get my clients to keep a food diary, and they probably think I never give it a rest, but I'm like going through being like little tweaks, because no one needs a meal plan to get their period back. They just need to tweak the existing meals that they're already having to make them more satisfying, and also a little bit more balanced in terms of making sure there's enough energy within them. And then you don't want a meal plan that's like, this is my period regain meal plan, and once it's back, then I
go back to exactly, because meal plans don't work long term. And like I always say that as well, like eat the way you eat, just let's try and make it a little bit healthier step by step.
Of course. And even that will help to learn in terms of like, okay, if I was to have this meal, what's it missing? Or like if, you know, someone's used to having soup at lunch, like, but they have bread with it, we can balance it out with adding a little bit more protein into it, or adding something with fats for the flavour. And whilst maybe soup and bread is filling in the moment, and soup occupies a kind of a larger volume, then the hunger kind of can surge later on. So it's just, I suppose you're learning habits for a lifetime. And whilst we're tipping in higher energy, higher fats at the moment, that kind of, we almost need to overshoot. We're like banking spare energy for the body to really reassure it that there's definitely enough energy that it can safely redirect it towards the hormones.
Yeah. And that craving thing is a huge thing across the board for a lot of women, isn't it? Like that evening time eating, the uncontrollable hunger that they'll have dinner and then they can't stop, or they do restrict themselves, but it's all they can think about, and it's really, really disempowering, isn't it? And it's really kind of debilitating. That, like, I know obviously, and like we'll dive into the mindset side of all of this now, but like, so there can be emotional attachments to it, but a lot of you know, people will say, oh, I emotionally eat. But sometimes a lot of it can actually just be structural in your meals, can't it? And, you know, the not having the right balance of protein, carbs, fats, not having the right amount of meals in the day and have them spaced out properly. And that can actually make a huge difference. And that, so like, to make those changes first, see where you stand. Be surprised at how much of a difference that makes to your cravings. And don't be afraid to not save enough for your evening time, whether it's calories or whether it's, you know, eating time. Like, just trust yourself and trust your body a little bit more.
Yeah, and like, I suppose, like, usually we start with like the structured eating. There's a lot of structure maybe in terms of mealtime and snack time, and it's what they need to include, and maybe going more to flexible eating where there's a range of times, so, you know, where we're still keeping and maintaining the regular eating. And then usually, like, in the last session, if someone's got their period back and things are looking regular, we discuss like next steps in terms of, okay, what would reintroducing some more activity look like, and how might we balance that in terms of still making sure that we maintain and keep our menstrual cycle as well, but also maybe moving more towards intuitive eating, where actually before we needed all of those structures in to ensure we ate enough. Like, what does that feel like? And whenever you do the hunger and the appetite work, then that can really help as well too, because like, I don't let myself get too hungry, because my first sign of hunger isn't a rumbling stomach, it's being really irritable and annoyed at everyone.
Hungry.
so I just know I'm not a nice person when I'm hungry. So like, I want to eat regularly for that reason, or, you know, or even if I've been sick or ill in the past, like, or something bad has happened, like I lose my appetite, I'm like, okay, to the smoothies we go, because I don't want to feel worse, or like the food to feed into those issues as well.
Find little hacks to get the nutrition into you in a way if you're not feeling hungry.
And it's normal to lose your appetite at certain times, but it's how we can, I suppose, do better than we were doing before, where we wouldn't just not eat. Like, can we at least get in some regular snacks and smaller meals, even if they aren't as much as what we maybe were going for before?
That it's not about being perfect.
Of course. It's more the patterns over individual meals or snacks.
Yeah, and like, I can imagine, like, this, you do need to span this over a long period of time to change these things. I would imagine you get a lot of resistance for this habit change in relation to mindset, and, you know, like, particularly if there's disordered eating patterns that have caused this. Do you find, is that something that you work through with clients, or are there times where you do refer that they need to work with a psychologist as well?
I would always say if someone's struggling to make the changes, that definitely therapy or psychologist input is super helpful, because ultimately, like, you know, most people know what they need to do. They've contacted me for a little bit of additional support and guidance and maybe reassurance that that's definitely what they need to do. But there can be underlying things that have fed into the way they eat, the patterns, why they exercise, when they exercise, all of those sorts of things. So it definitely would never be wasted in terms of any therapy or psychological input. I'd say a lot of the people that I see in my own clinic have kind of reached the end of their tether, and they're like, okay,
they're ready for change.
Exactly. But I always say to them, you're feeling great in this first month, but in the second and third month, there's definitely going to be a slump. So like, write down how you feel now and the positives that you're feeling, so you can look back on that. But I also give maybe some journal prompts and things like that, like, what does a healthy relationship look like with food, or do we know anyone with that, or, you know, what things can we do to comfort and soothe when we have taken away the restriction and taken away the exercise. Because really, you're kind of, it's like a maze that you're trying to get out of whenever you're feeling that discomfort. And if you used to go for like the restriction route or increase in activity route, well, if you take those away, you need something else. in lieu of that as well. But once the period comes back, then everyone always forgets that phase. But it is difficult. And sometimes I know it sounds very dramatic, but I do describe it as the stages of grief, because there can be anger, resentment, bargaining. Well, maybe I don't need to do this. You know, this seems like too much. Sure, they aren't doing that over there. And then also acceptance. And I suppose maybe most people are at the acceptance phase when we start working together. But I always do, like, I make no qualms about the fact that their body and weight might change, but it will also, they will feel more dramatic because we make changes quite quickly in the first month, and then we're tweaking and preening in month 2, 3 and 4 and monitoring different signs. So once someone gets their period back, it all makes sense. But along the way, maybe they notice increased discharge or increased libido, or their digestion gets better, they're sleeping better, energy is getting better as well. So it's good to pick out those little bits of evidence to reaffirm, yeah, this is needed and this is our goal.
What about exercise? So I know, again, how long is a piece of string? You're not going to have the same kind of advice for everyone. And you kind of touched on it a little bit already. But, like, do you get clients to pull right back?
No, I don't.
Exercise?
I usually, like, we always take a week and discuss exercise, and always the first thing is how we can fuel it a little bit better. But I'd always educate in terms of, like, look, these types of exercise, like the HIIT and the higher intensity running, are going to be more stressful and feeding into this issue much more at the moment. Like, what do we think in terms of, could we substitute them for something a little bit lower? Could we split up the rest days? Most people save the rest days for the weekend, and then they chuck everything in and Monday to Friday when they're really busy with work and they're trying to, you know, tick all the boxes as well. So can we spread those out? So I suppose it is very individual. There's never no blanket amount that I would recommend, and you know, it's nice to do some movement and activity, but we'd also explore the relationship with exercise, and there are some questionnaires, like in terms of exercise addiction questionnaire or compulsive exercise test, that we might go through and just to give a bit more insight into, okay, maybe I thought there wasn't an issue here, but you know, I'm scoring pretty high in this, or you know, there are these things in terms of being flexible with activity or being able to prioritize other things above activity actually are quite tricky. If someone struggles with activity, I always say it is going to be easier to reduce than if you get an injury and you have to stop. And that's really confronting. And a lot of clients that I've worked with recently have got injuries. And I say, this is like you're on the motorway and you're trying to get into the other lane and there's a teeny gap. Like, this is the gap. We're going to get your period back because your body has been like, we've given you enough subtle signs and you're not listening to them. Now it's crunch time. Yeah, very individual for different people. For some people, they'll be open to stopping or reducing for a short time. But for most people, we maybe tweak the fuel and the types and the timing first.
Yeah. Baby steps, because obviously change, like, you know, this discomfort, like any type of change, life change is going to be uncomfortable. Yeah. So it's about, isn't it about like stepping out of your comfort zone, pulling back a little bit more than you'd like, or, you know, fueling a little bit more than you like, but trusting the process and not taking away anything. Completely.
But maybe it might be moving the gym session to Saturday whenever you actually have a bit of breathing space to go, rather than be like, I need to get up, the alarm set, and then I need to go my breakfast. A really busy day as well. So looking at all those, and also any activity. Most people think, oh, you know, what activity do you do? You go to the gym or you run, but they don't mention the walk to work or cycling to and from places or being on their feet all day with work too. Yeah,
they don't think about those things. Yeah. Right, to finish up, can we do a little quick fire round?
Okay.
These are just quick fire questions. They're personal, not that personal questions.
Okay.
I ask most people, I ask everyone these questions, and the whole purpose is, it's just 10 questions, is to show everyone that there's no such thing as perfect. There's no one size fits all for health. They're just one word answers.
Okay. Oh, one word. Okay.
Sorry. One word answer.
Short.
One word answer. Yeah.
Okay.
So quick and to the point. Favorite food?
Probably like cakes or buns, tray bakes.
Anything sweet.
I know people call them different things. In the north we call any sweet thing a bun. But tray bake or
Okay, love it. Favorite exercise?
Walking.
Me too.
Yeah.
What time do you get up at most mornings?
7 with a 5-minute snooze.
Love it. How many hours do you sleep?
Oh, I'm trying to work in this. Like 7.5. 7 to 7.5.
Very good. We're actually very similar. Your favourite hobby?
Favorite hobby? Tennis.
Do you drink alcohol?
Yeah.
Do you meditate?
No. Sometimes if Shavasana is as much as a meditation as I get, and that's a nice lie down.
Do you have a morning routine?
Yeah, I love a cup of tea in bed. I really, I'm like a little granny.
But I love that that's your morning routine. It's not like I need to list 5 things I'm grateful for and I need to go and put my feet in the grass and I need to...
Well, no, sometimes I go through phases of doing that, but they don't really maintain. Yeah, I like a cup of tea and
but
then
the cup of tea in bed always stays at part of the routine.
And a cup of tea very soon after food follows. So, you know, it's not suppressing that appetite.
Yeah, exactly. A cup of tea into breakfast. Love it, love it. What annoys you?
What
about anything?
Me, I would say, you know, if I'm driving from Dublin to Antrim, maybe sometimes I get a little bit of road rage.
So the cortisol levels go up then.
Yeah.
Last question, and this can be more than one word.
Okay. I mean, I think I've done more than one word
for us. But yeah, what does the word health mean to you?
I think it means nutrition being part of it, but not being the whole puzzle, and that there's flexibility within that, and it's not restriction. It's more about what we can add and enhance as well.
Yes.
A waffly answer.
Love it. Kathryn, thank you so much for giving me your time today.
I've loved this. This has been great.
So good.
Thank
it's
you
been
so
amazing.
much.
Thank you. And if anyone wants to go to find out about your clinic, reach out to you. Is website, Instagram, where's the best place for people to find you?
I have a website. I would say I've been on it 5 times this year. There's not much happening there, but there's information on it. But most of the information probably people get on Instagram or TikTok. It's the same on both. I know I should have a strategy. So at herhealth.dietitian is probably the best place. Perfect. Or if you want to email me, Kathryn, Kathryn, at herhealthdietitian.com.
Amazing. And we'll share all that in the show notes as well anyway.
Thank you so much.
So thank you so much.
Thank you.
I just want to say thank you so much for listening to the podcast. And if you haven't already, do go back and listen to some of our previous episodes. Stay tuned for future episodes. So the best thing to do here is to make sure that you are subscribed to the podcast. It also makes such a difference to me if you do. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. And if there's any episodes at all that you particularly enjoy, please do share it with your friends, share it in your WhatsApp groups, share it on your stories. Please do tag me. I always love to hear it. Follow us on social media. You'll find me at Kate Hamilton Health on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube. Until next time, thank you for listening.